Fourth on my list of common arguments advocating a Book of Mormon Great Lakes geography is Joseph Smith made several comments that suggest that ancient remains discovered in their vicinity once belonged to Book of Mormon peoples. With one notable exception, Joseph never claimed to have received revelation concerning any ancient Indian artifacts. The one possible exception is Zelf. In 1834, while traveling to Missouri with Zion's camp, Joseph and several other members passed through Pike County, Illinois, which was dotted with Indian burial mounds, bones, and other artifacts. Like the rest of us, these early Mormons tried to make sense of new information according to their current understanding. To the early Mormons, all ancient American artifacts were obvious evidences for the Book of Mormon. Joseph was not immune to such speculation. Writing to his wife Emma, he recounted how their group had wandered over the plains of the Nephites and the mounds of the Book of Mormon people, picking up their skulls and their bones as a proof of its divine authenticity. On June 3rd, the day before Joseph wrote his letter to Emma, some of the men had dug into a mound and discovered human skeletal remains and an arrowhead. The current edition of History of the Church suggests a first-hand account by the prophet wherein he said by way of revelation he learned that the bones belonged to a white Lamanite named Zelf, who was a warrior under the prophet Onondagas, who was known from the hill Cumorah, or the Eastern Sea, to the Rocky Mountains, and that he was killed during the last great struggle of the Lamanites and Nephites. History of the Church 2:79. This account, however, is not a first-hand report from the prophet. In typical 19th century fashion, the official history comprised details from a variety of journal entries, but was written as if Joseph himself was authoring the history. Willard Richards, who was responsible for compiling the events into one narrative, made some alterations that affected how future generations understood the details of the event. Of the 7 accounts of the event, only one mentions Cumorah, while the other 5 do not. By the time our current version of the compilation came to be, some details that are not supported by all of the 6 accounts were included into print. As Kenneth Godfrey observes, Wilfred Woodruff's statement that mounds in the area had been built probably by the Nephites and Lamanites became an implied certainty when Richards left out the word probably. The mere arrow of the 3 earliest accounts became an Indian arrow, and finally a Lamanitish arrow. The phrase known from the Atlantic to the Rocky Mountains became known from the hill Cumorah, or Eastern Sea to the Rocky Mountains. The statement that the battle in which Zelf was killed occurred among the Lamanites became with the Lamanites. There is also some question as to the accuracy of the various accounts. We don't know, for example, how much time elapsed between when the event transpired and when the accounts were recorded. Some of the accounts claim that Zelf's bones belonged to a man large in stature, whereas other accounts claim that he was short and stout. We know from at least one record that the author was not a first-hand witness, and we are unsure if any of the authors were first-hand witnesses or they simply recorded hearsay. In general, however, the accounts agree that Joseph said the bones belonged to a white Lamanite named Zelf. Several of the accounts suggest that Joseph learned this information from a vision. As noted in a past issue, the term Lamanite is a cultural designation assigned to Lamanites by an outside group, just like the term Indians. An individual could become a Lamanite. An entire group could become Lamanites when no other Lamanites existed. The term varied in application during Book of Mormon times. During Joseph's day, and for the most part in our modern Mormon vernacular, The term Lamanite was synonymous with Indian, Native American, or in some cases, Polynesian. Therefore, even if we accept a belief that Joseph received a revelation about a white Lamanite named Zelf, what do we really learn? According to such a revelation, these men had discovered the bones of a pure or righteous Indian, Lamanite, possibly a prophet, and there is nothing in LDS doctrine that would preclude a Lamanite from also being a prophet, who was killed in battle. The issue of white and pure will be discussed in a future installment. While we may freely accept that Joseph had a vision concerning the person whose bones were discovered, we learn more about Mormon speculations concerning Book of Mormon geography than we do about revelations on the Book of Mormon geography. As Apostle John A. Whitsaw remarked, this is not so much of value in Book of Mormon geographical studies, since Zelf probably dated from a later time when Nephites and Lamanites had been somewhat dispersed and had wandered over the country. Improvement Era, July 1950, page 547.
If you like this podcast, you can help promote it by subscribing to it in iTunes or by rating it and writing a review. Post a link on your blog and Facebook page and tell your friends about us. Questions or comments about this episode can be sent to podcast@fairlds.org or join the conversation at fairblog.org. Michael Ash is the author of the book Shaken Faith Syndrome, Strengthening One's Testimony in the Face of Criticism and Doubt, as well as the book of Faith and Reason, 80 Evidences Supporting the Prophet Joseph Smith. Both books are available for purchase online through the Fair Bookstore. Music for this episode was provided courtesy of Lawrence Green. The opinions expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the views of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or that of Fair Mormon.